Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
I think a lot of people may have said and asked me, why were you ever afraid? And I thought to myself, that's a good question because I was a fraidy cat when I was younger, but I wasn't afraid. And I feel that way going forward into my other career that I will talk about is I just didn't have that fear, which then made me realize maybe this was my calling.
Just a quick note, I want to give you a content warning disclaimer for this episode. It's best listened to without little ears around. So put on your headphones as Mary discusses some more sensitive topics based on her time in the FBI. Thank you. Her name is Mary Hudon. And I am so excited for you to get to hear the story that God is continuing to write in her life. I know her because she's our International Student Program Director at King's Schools and Residential Life Director. But years ago, she hosted a talk where she shared about her time in the FBI. And as you can imagine, every high schooler at that school and parents, and I was one of them, packed into her classroom to hear her story. We were captivated. And so that's where I got introduced to you, Mary. And so I just thought, I want to put your story on a larger platform. So thank you for saying yes and joining me here.
Thank you, Sarah. It's such a privilege to be here. I'm excited too.
One of the themes that you've seen in your life, and I've heard through your story, is just that of what it looks like to be a warrior, to be fearless, to break boundaries. And I'm curious, before we get into all the really good stuff, talk to me about little Mary, toddler Mary. Did you have, would your parents have been able to say this girl's going into the FBI just knowing you as a little girl?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
I'm one of four, and I'm a twin, and I was the baby. And so my childhood was a little bit different. I was a little bit afraid of even balloons, and I would cry at every noise that would happen around me. But something changed when I became a teen. When I was 14, I had never experienced God. But one day I had prayed about something. I had heard that you can pray. And I was having dreams, actually, when I was that age, of I was on a white horse with a sword, and I would have dreams about me being on a horse, like a warrior, saving people. And so one day I was praying about something, and actually the prayer was answered, and I was convinced that God was real. And so I went down in my basement. We lived on a farm in the middle of nowhere because we were Italians, and my dad immigrated from Italy in the 1940s, and we didn't have any phone or TV, so I would go in the basement and I would entertain myself with looking at National Geographic books that were given to us because we were very poor. And I'd look through the book and I'd say, wow, I would love to go to these places all over the world. And something occurred to me was that we were on this planet, and I'm here, and then across the entire planet, there were people that spoke differently than me, looked differently than me, and they were all created by God. And I was just so excited about meeting them someday. But in my head, I knew as a young little girl on a pig farm that I may never be able to meet them because we were very poor. We had 8 mouths to feed, and we made $14,000 a year. So there was no intent to go to college, basically to work all my life, as my dad and mom did. And so that kind of was my youth and my beginning of my experience with thinking that I think God wants me to do something big, but I don't know how that's going to happen.
Well, already I'm just riveted because the chasm between where you were looking at those National Geographic magazines to what you felt somewhere deep inside of you, that seems like a Grand Canyon size gap. So how did it happen?
Well, I think it's interesting because God already had planned out my life, and I had not understood what that meant, actually, Sarah. I decided that I wanted to do something. I wanted to help people. That was a huge desire in my heart. So when I was in high school, I worked on campus, and there was a place where you could work for the police department, and it was for students, and I worked there. And I got really intrigued about, wow, I can actually do something here. So I started doing that, and then I ended up working in high school for a sheriff's department. And I thought, that's really interesting, something I kind of want to be interested in doing. But then I always thought I couldn't go to college because I couldn't afford it. So I went to work at City Hall, and I met my first mentor that God sent to me. And she was the city personnel manager, and she told me that I was smart enough to go to college and I should go. And I told her, well, I don't think I can because I don't have the money. And she said, well, if I help you and I go to college with you for the first year, would you consider it?
Wait, what? This is not even a family member. This is someone who saw potential in you and was willing to financially invest in you because she saw that much promise.
Yes. And so she went to class with me at night, and I would do her homework. So that was the deal. That was the deal. She said, you have to do my homework. So she did. Her name's Rita, and she's still one of my dearest friends. She's city manager over at Oceanside, California. And so she walked my journey with me for the first year, and she said, you have to go to college. It is in your life. You have to. So I decided to do that. And when I went to college my first 2 years, there was something inside of me that kept drawing me to go into a field that would help people. So we fast forward to college and 4-year college, and I got an opportunity to be an intern at Drug Enforcement Administration. And that was the agency that actually was the premier agency for drug, narcotics, large-scale cocaine dealers, cartels, and that kind of thing. And I decided I'm going to try this as an intern. Well, I was jumping out of helicopters, chopping down 15-foot marijuana plants as a 21-year-old, and I thought, that's it. I'm doing this, right? So there was a organization called Campaign Against Marijuana Planting at the time. It was illegal. And I decided, you know what, if I can do this, then maybe I could help people come out of this way of living who take drugs. In the meantime, I was also asked to work in a vice unit. A vice unit is in a police department, and they work on the streets with prostitutes. So I became an undercover prostitute for almost a year and worked actually arresting with the police department prostitutes and people on the street that put them there. And that was a huge eye-opener because a lot of those girls were either on drugs and they just needed Jesus.
What did your parents think about rappelling out of helicopters and being an undercover prostitute at the age of 22?
Yes. So that's a good question, Sarah. I didn't share with you that I lost my dad when I was 21. He died of cancer, and that was a really hard time for me. My dad was really strict. He was brought up in a very poor environment in Italy, and so he expected us to just work and not go to college. And so we had a really kind of a tough time before he died. So he died, and then my mother was left on her own, and frankly, she didn't know. I didn't tell her. So we lived out in the middle of nowhere, and I went to college, and it was an hour away. And during the time I was there, I just never told her. Frankly, she just didn't know anything. Because if she did, she would probably tell me, don't ever do that again. So I protected her, I feel like. Yeah.
Because you knew so intrinsically that this is exactly what you were supposed to be doing.
Yes. And I just wasn't afraid. I think a lot of people may have said and asked me, why were you ever afraid? And I thought to myself, that's a good question because I was a fraidy cat when I was younger. But I wasn't afraid. And I feel that way going forward into my other career that I will talk about is I just didn't have that fear, which then made me realize maybe this was my calling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so keep going. So undercover.
So that was when I was in 21, 22. When I graduated from college, I went straight into the FBI Academy, and that's at Quantico, Virginia in 1988.
Do you have to be invited to do that?
Yes. So in order to be able to do that, you have to apply and you have to qualify to be in it. As an intern, if you actually succeeded in the internship for 2 years and you applied and you were still physically fit, they would ask you to be able to go into the FBI Academy within a certain amount of time. You still had to do the academy, you still had to qualify, and you still had to accomplish what they were asking you to do. So my first experience in Quantico was in a classroom when all of the team got together. We had 48 people in our basic agent class. 5 were women, and the rest were very large, tough men from the military and former law enforcement. And here's little old me, 5'2" and 112 pounds. And they just looked at me. So the first task we had to do was they turned out the lights in a classroom and they handed us a Smith & Wesson handgun. And they asked us to take it apart and put it back together. And actually, I did not even know you could take a gun apart. So I was just looking at it like, So I was looking around and it was dark. And of course, I didn't take it apart because I didn't know how. And then they turned on the light and they said, this is going to be what's going to save your life someday. So you really need to learn how to use this weapon and you need to know how to take it apart and everything that it's made of. So that was the first week I was in FBI Academy.
What did you go to bed thinking that night?
I thought, what am I doing here? But yet, it's interesting, Sarah, because I still was so intrigued. I really have a curiosity for that kind of thing where I'm challenged and I thought, well, I'm going to learn how to do this. So it was a 4-month academy and there were so many challenges when I was there. A lot of, practicals where you're fighting other men, you're boxing other men, you're wrestling other men, you're operationally with live fire, with so that we call them SMGs or semi-automatic weapons, shotguns, handguns. And I wasn't great at shooting at the first section of the academy. So the first couple of weeks I was in trouble because the gun they gave us in our hand was large. And my hand's really small because I am a small, petite woman. And so every time I'd shoot the weapon in the range, I would miss and it would go somewhere else, not on my target. So that was one of the first challenges I had that I had to literally get in my mind, okay, I'm not going to make it and I'm going to have to pray about this. So the range master said, you are going to be kicked out. My last name was Gallo at the time because I'm Italian and that was my maiden name. They said, Gallo, this is your lifeline. If you don't shoot well, you're going to be out of here in a week. And so I sat up on the bleachers, never forgot this, and everyone watched me and I prayed. I literally just said, Lord, if I'm not supposed to be here, great, get me out of here. Because I had black and blues. It was cold. My hands were bleeding from just shooting 1,000, bullets constantly. And I was ready to go. And God had a different plan for me. So I was put in remedial training. Remedial's not something to be proud of. There was about 3 or 4 of the people put in remedial training. And what you have to do is you literally take outside of the normal day training and shoot. And you're just shooting and learning how to take your weapon out of your holster. And so I went to remedial training and I was assigned a special counselor. And I won't say his name because I'll tell you a little bit about him later. But every one of us had a counselor that we were attached to. And he told me, Mary, you're going to have to really lean into this. You're going to have to learn how to do this well. And so I trained with him almost every day. And when I came back, everyone was watching me. They knew this was it. If I didn't shoot well on this next round, I would be gone. So again, I prayed and I got out on the range and we were all standing out there and it was really cold. It was December and January on the East Coast and we were called to shoot. And at the very end of that frame of shooting, we all walked to the targets. And my range master turned around to my neighbor agent standing beside me and said, were you shooting on her target? And he said, no, why? Because I had shot so well. I had gotten a 94 out of 100, which is pretty high for even anyone, let alone me. So I knew God had said, okay, this is it. You are going to stay. And everyone couldn't believe it. So that was my first answered prayer. I feel like God really wanted me to be there, and he confirmed that.
Did that build confidence? Like, once you knew that that's where you were supposed to be, from the Lord. Did that instill confidence in you?
It did. I had a lot of challenges because when you are put in a position that you don't really understand, like, why was God allowing me to be in these positions? I was questioning if I was really meant to be there. And yet he confirmed for me so many times when I was in the academy class that he wanted me to do something and I didn't know what it was, but I just knew that it was something that it was bigger than me.
And was that enough for you? You didn't have to know what it was. It was enough to just know.
And yes, it was, because my family didn't agree that I should go. And so my oldest sister, I remember her saying to me, "You are not doing this. You are not going." And I looked at her and I said, "Yes, I am."
Is that the breaking boundaries part of you?
It was. I just said, "You know what? Yes, I am." And it wasn't mean. It was just a confirmation that I wasn't afraid that my family didn't want me to go. I just knew I had to. So I went. 2 weeks before I graduated, there was an incident. So we got called into our classroom in the morning, and we had quite a few people standing in front of us. One was a psychiatrist. And we knew something was not quite right. And this was one of my moments where I questioned a little bit about what I was going to be doing. What happened was my counselor, who I was assigned to, that I saw every single day, shot and killed his wife the night before and took an overdose. And he was in the hospital fighting for his life. He had a 3-year-old daughter who was in the arms of his wife at the time. She had handed him divorce papers, and he couldn't handle it. And so he was basically not dead, but they were not sure he was going to live. And it took me I couldn't believe it. I didn't even know what to think. I was thinking to myself, wait, this was a person I trusted every day. This is a person that I put my life on the line for, because when you're federal agents, and you have, to depend on the person next to you to save your life or not, you invest in that person. And so it hit me really hard. And I did question, should I be here, Lord? What am I doing here? Is this what's going to happen if I'm in law enforcement? Is this what's going to happen? So he ended up going to federal prison for 25 years. He didn't die. But that really shocked me. And it actually, when I left and graduated in December 1988, it was hard for me to get through that. And my dad had just died. So there was a lot of challenges, but yet God had kept me strong. When I arrived home in December 1988, I had a submachine gun, a 6-hour P226 handgun, which is a huge handgun, and a raid vest. And my mother had no idea what I was doing there, because she's old-fashioned. She was born in 1930. And I dropped all of my gear down on the floor, and she walked into the room, because I was moved in with her because my dad had died. And she said, "What have you done?" And she started crying. And I said, "Mom, really, it's going to be okay. I promise," right? And so that was another challenge for me to realize that my mother was just like shocked. "What are you doing, Mary? Why would you do this?"
Because probably her idea of what you would do would be to get married.
Yes.
And make dinner and have
yes.
babies.
Yes, like all my other 3 sisters would want to do. And a couple of them have already did that. Yeah. So my when I literally got home, my first case was a search warrant, and they have a battering ram. It's this massive, big steel battering ram. You have to have 2 or 3 agents carrying it, and I got the opportunity to be on the back part of that. And we you ram in the door in those days in the 1980s, and you say search warrant, agents. And the first thing that happened was, it was the first time I ever pulled a gun out and aimed it at a real person. There were dogs, and they were running towards me, and there were pit bulls. A lot of times drug dealers were using pit bulls to really attack. They were heavy-duty drug dealers. They weren't just... we're talking about like people with 1,300 pounds of China white heroin or massive amounts of black tar heroin. So these are not people that want to get caught, and they're very dangerous. A lot of booby traps, a lot of weapons. And so I remember I remember going through that door thinking, oh my gosh, this is real. Oh my goodness, right? And yet I still didn't have the fear. And so when I went home that week, I remembered I had received a clock from Focus on the Family, and it was in my bathroom, in my mom's bathroom. And I'd look at that clock every single day. And it was 2 Timothy 1:7, for God has not given you a spirit of fear, but of strength, power, love, and a sound mind. I read that every single day. And that is what I felt. I was fearless. I don't know why. I just felt like I was the warrior. I was fearless, and I was going into this. And it was something I could not understand of myself because I was a scaredy cat when I was little. I mean, I was afraid of balloon popping. My next step was that I got assigned to Operation Drumbeat, which was a very large scale Colombian cartel organization. And that scared me a little bit because I knew they were dangerous. And so I was also sent to FBI SWAT school during that process of time in the first year into second year of my law enforcement experience. And not everybody got to go. So I was sent to FBI SWAT school, different level in San Francisco, jumping out of helicopters, rappelling out of windows. I got hooked onto a helicopter skid, and I was jumping out, and I got locked into that, and I had to jump about, I think it was like 9 feet onto a building, and I thought literally I'm going to break my legs and die here. And I just said, well, here we go. So I jumped off and I survived it. I was teased a lot by the guys, right? But I learned so much about resilience. I learned about depending on the Lord, trusting God every ounce and every minute of my life because I literally couldn't do what I was doing. And during that time I was in SWAT school, I met a man named Bill. And all of these guys that are there are very tough. In 1980s, they had big egos then. And women weren't really in law enforcement, not in DEA and FBI, that kind of thing. But he came up to me and he said, I want to tell you something. I got your back. And I never knew how he knew I was a Christian, but he said, I'm a Christian and I'm praying for you. And at the end of that SWAT training, he came up and had an album, literally, had signed it. He was a Christian singer, yet he was an FBI agent. And I felt the Lord gave him to me so that he could protect me during that time I was there. Because no matter what, female, male, it's challenging, really hard work.
When you said that you really learned a lot about how to rely on the Lord during this time, in my mind, I'm thinking, tell us some specifics about how, because here we are listening to you, and the scariest thing I might have to do during the day, I don't know, change a flat tire on the side of the road. I don't know. And it's like, here you are so frequently in high stakes life or death situations. And so I need to know just a ounce of how you learned to stare fear in the face and trust that the Lord had your back. Mm-hmm. What would you say to all of us?
Well, I feel that life cannot be lived if you're a Christian without knowing there's risk. And risk is basically just saying by faith, I believe, Jesus, that you are real, that you protect us, that you, when you have a calling on your life, that you are with me every step of the way. And if during that time I die in the process of the calling that I have on my life, then it's been worth it. Because literally you can live a month in this world or you can live 80 years. But it's not the amount of time you live. It's basically what the investment and quality of your life is when you serve God. And I will say that after I left drug enforcement and the whole arena there in 1994, we were called to the Middle East. And at the time, I had an 11-month-old son, Mason, and we knew this was a big challenge for my husband and I. And I haven't even told you about my husband, but we have traveled all over the world, and there are so many other things that I should tell you. But even then, when I had a son, my child, I remember saying to myself, well, at a certain point in my life, I said, he is a gift from you. And it's really hard to say that and say that if he's, got to be with you, then he's got to be with you. If I've got to be with you, then I've got to be with you. And so I feel that way still now. I don't know why I feel that way. I just feel this confidence that God has given me that at any time in my life, I'm grateful to be here because I was born not really expecting to be born. I'm a twin and my mother didn't know I was going to be born. So I don't have a middle name because of it. I came out like an hour after my sister and they're like, who are you?
Wait, she didn't know she was having twins.
No.
So she had a baby.
Yeah.
And thought it's over.
Yeah.
And then is still in pain and having contractions.
Yes.
Who realized in the room there's another baby coming?
Well, she said, the nurse came in and she's like, okay, we're going to give you a little shot to go to sleep. It was 1964. And my mom's like, there's something not right here. Can you check me again? And the nurse listens to my mom's tummy and she screams, doctor, there's another heartbeat in here. And here I come out. I was 5 pounds and they did not have a name for me. So I was named after my Italian grandmother, Mary, and I don't have a middle name. So there.
Okay, listen, Mary, you have already blown us away. I need you to stick around and do another episode with us because I do want to hear the story of how you met your husband. I do want to hear what happened as you wrapped up your time at FBI. I hear there's something in the back of my mind about swimming. Yeah. Okay. You're saying yes. We're going to have to hear that story, but we don't have enough time today. So you sit tight and we are going to do another episode with Mary Hudon. And I'm sorry that you have to wait 2 weeks for it, but I think it's going to be worth it. So make sure that you subscribe and we'll be back with more with Mary. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Passion Meets Purpose podcast. Thank you to Josh Model, our show producer. Thank you to Lana Vegas, our scheduler and our guest coordinator. These episodes would not happen if it wasn't for them. And I would welcome it if you would take a moment to rate and review the podcast. It helps others to find it. Plus, it just makes the show better. And one of my favorite things is to hear from you on who would you like to be featured as a guest on this show. So you can connect with us at purposely.com. Thank you.